You open your eyes in London in the year 1348, and an unforgettable, indelible scent instantly hits your nose. Just a second ago, you were sitting in your cozy 21st century room with modern air conditioning and an air purifier, and now you can't even imagine what it means to breathe oxygen that's half rotting. Many modern people arrogantly think that their ancestors in the Middle Ages died from the terrible Black Death epidemic simply because they were stupid or incredibly lazy.
But here's the thing. Once you're here, you realize that people really did try to survive and maintain maximum cleanliness using the crazy methods available to them at the time.
Now you'll see this historical nightmare from the inside and understand why no modern person, with all their gadgets, would last even a single short week here. The problem isn't that the locals enjoy living in absolute filth, but rather how they understand the very nature of disease. Your elderly neighbor across the way sincerely and wholeheartedly believes that the plague is transmitted exclusively through bad smells. So he simply surrounded himself with fragrant flowers and put his mind at ease. It sounds like a rather sweet, romantic habit, but this naive illusion of safety will cost the poor man his life literally the very next day after the first wave of infections begins. Your familiar modern medicine requires years of training, sterile, bright operating rooms, and powerful electron microscopes, while local science relies entirely on the movement of the planets and morning prayers. And the scariest part of this whole story is that this system, which seems absurd from your perspective, appears to everyone around you to be absolutely logical and scientifically sound. Today you will walk through this doomed city and experience firsthand every single layer of this gripping, everyday sanitary catastrophe.
You'll peer into overflowing cesspools, watch surprises suddenly fly out of windows, and try to wash yourself without accidentally dying in the process.
Your old leather boots are already fully prepared for a long immersion in deep street mud, and your nose is on the verge of shutting down all basic self-preservation receptors. Just realize one extremely important thing. Here, everything is done strictly according to the rules of this harsh era, but those very rules were written by death itself. Welcome to this cruel world, where every ordinary breath you take could be your last, and your usual daily hygiene routine could turn out to be a real death sentence. You take your first cautious step outside the threshold of your old house, and your thick soul sinks softly into a thick, dark sludge of completely unknown origin. This entire main street is one continuous, wide ditch through which a toxic mixture of mud, horse manure, and putrid rainwater flows extremely slowly. Modern public utilities would instantly post a bright biological hazard sign here. But for you, this is simply the main road to the local market. Right in the center of the road, a small drainage channel has been carefully laid out, but it gets clogged with household trash much faster than you can blink or take a deep breath. People around you calmly walk through this mess in leather boots or rough wooden shoes, trying their hardest not to slip on discarded pig entrails. In the cold winter, this entire brown mass on the street freezes solid, turning into an incredibly bumpy and dangerous ice rink made of frozen sewage. You have to walk on it every day, which is critically dangerous for fragile human bones. But at least the monstrous stench temporarily recedes, giving you a brief winter respite.
But in the long-awaited spring, when all this layered splendor begins to melt rapidly under the rays of the warm sun, your beloved city turns into a giant gas chamber.
The mixture of thawed, ancient manure and rotting kitchen waste gives off copious fumes that sting your eyes, just as they do for even the most hardy city guards. A modern person would instantly lose consciousness from a single breath of this, yet here everyone happily calls it the fresh scent of the long-awaited spring thaw. You might reasonably ask why they don't simply pave all the streets with smooth stone and lay proper ceramic pipes deep underground. The answer is strikingly simple and tragic. It's insanely expensive, and all the city taxes collected consistently go toward yet another protracted war with the neighbors rather than toward urban improvement. The ancient Romans had a magnificent multi-level sewer system a full 1,000 years before you were born. But these technologies were happily forgotten. It seems just as absurd as if you suddenly forgot how to use the internet today and switched entirely to slow pigeon post. You are in fact living on the great ruins of brilliant engineering ideas, slowly and painfully drowning in your own waste, and considering all of this to be an inevitable act of divine providence. When there is heavy downpour, the level of this toxic sludge in the narrow streets rises so high that it begins to flood right into the ground floors of residential buildings. On such gloomy days, you can sit quietly on the second floor and watch with interest as wooden buckets and bloated dead rats float past your window. Resourceful people hastily build makeshift rickety bridges out of thin planks so you can at least somehow cross the churning street without taking a bath in the soup. One wrong, frantic move, and you fall screaming straight into the open sewer to the loud amusement of all the local filthy kids. After such an epic fall, your only nice outfit will go through a long, boiling wash, and you risk catching a deadly infection from the slightest scratch on your knee.
But the most striking thing is how your adaptable brain adjusts to this endless visual and tactile disaster every single day.
You stop paying attention to the color of the street grime a long time ago. Your trained gaze simply and automatically searches for relatively dry islands of safety. Your modern mind is accustomed to scanning the surrounding space for dangers like speeding cars or open manhole covers on the sidewalk. Here, however, your mind constantly scans the street for deep puddles of fresh manure and the unpredictable flight paths of trash flying out of neighboring windows. This is a basic medieval system of complex pedestrian navigation, deeply ingrained in your physical reflexes from early childhood. Summing up this filth, the open street sewers quickly become for you the primary metaphor for the entire complex medieval life in the age of epidemics. You get used to walking every day on the very edge of an invisible abyss, literally stepping on deadly waste that is slowly but surely killing you. And when the Great Plague finally reached your city, it didn't even have to bother building new routes for its carriers. You yourselves had carefully created the perfect high-speed highway for it out of wet mud, well-fed rats, and rotting food scraps right beneath your windows. It was a perfectly designed biological trap that you meekly and willingly walked into every time you simply decided to leave your home. You walk thoughtfully down a narrow, winding street, constantly and nervously looking up, like a paranoid person expecting a sudden air raid from enemy aircraft. And believe me, this is not medical paranoia at all, but your most basic survival instinct, because a warm waterfall could pour out on you from any window. The custom of emptying overflowing chamber pots right onto the street seems to you, as a modern, clean-living person, the height of primitive savagery and a lack of culture. But just imagine for a second that you don't have running water at home, and going down a steep, creaky staircase late at night with a full bucket of waste is no picnic.
That's why people here simply open their wooden shutters, shout a formal warning into the darkness, and send all their daily troubles off on a free and beautiful flight.
The funniest and most paradoxical thing about this situation is that shouting a warning loudly is considered a sign of exceptional manners and a high-class, aristocratic upbringing. If you honestly warned a random passerby with the traditional shout, your conscience is absolutely clear before God, and if they didn't manage to jump out of the way, that's entirely their own problem. In your modern and boring world, such brazen behavior would guarantee you a huge fine and a lengthy lawsuit for emotional distress. Here, however, it's simply a great excuse for a brief street altercation, which usually ends just as you're wiping your face with a dirty sleeve in disgust. Your complex legal system reliably protects you from verbal insults, while the local primitive police can't even protect you from feces flying from above. But here's the thing. This fascinating process is directly linked to the unique architecture of your tall wooden houses. The upper floors of old buildings often overhang the lower ones significantly, forming peculiar protective canopies over the narrow, almost sunless street. Because of this architectural feature, the foul-smelling liquid poured from above doesn't always land in the middle of the road, but often flows picturesquely right down the walls of your neighbors below. Every day, this creates a unique abstract pattern on the wooden facades. It sounds crazy, yes, but this system of aerial waste disposal also had its own unexpected economic benefits for the population. Some enterprising peasants come to the city early in the morning specifically to collect fresh street waste for free to fertilize their fields. Your modern office job requires a college degree, yet it still pays less than what a strong dung collector earned in the 14th century. However, even their efforts are woefully insufficient for the huge, overpopulated city, so flying pots remain the primary method of waste disposal. After all, gravity works for you absolutely free, requires no salary, and never goes on a union strike. This constant threat from above has given you a very distinctive gait, with your head perpetually hunched over your shoulders. You instinctively walk very quickly, always hugging the walls, where the likelihood of a direct hit is slightly lower due to the overhanging roofs. Modern orthopedists would surely be horrified by your poor posture, but a straight back here is an unaffordable luxury that comes at too high a price.
It's your peculiar dance of survival on the dirty streets, where every step must be measured, and your ears are always tuned to the creak of shutters opening above.
To sum up this slippery topic, it's safe to say that the tradition of dumping waste out the windows perfectly reflects your level of scientific understanding of the world. People were solving a momentary local problem of cleanliness in their bedroom without giving a second thought to the fact that they were creating a global catastrophe on the street. This is a classic example of how narrow-minded thinking kills entire cities far more effectively than any enemy siege. And when fleas infected with the deadly plague began to breed comfortably in these street piles, you simply didn't understand where this great calamity had come from. You yourselves carefully showered your city with death from open windows, sincerely hoping that tomorrow's morning rain would miraculously wash it all away. You stand on a wooden pier near the city's main waterway, and its color resembles thick meat broth more than clean drinking water. This mighty and filthy river simultaneously serves as your main source of drinking water, a place to wash clothes, and a massive free dumping ground for industrial waste. You're used to turning on the chrome faucet in the kitchen and getting crystal clear water that has passed through dozens of filters and undergone complex chemical purification. Here, however, you simply lower an old wooden bucket into the murky current, where just 5 minutes earlier, a local tanner was washing fresh cowhides in a caustic solution. It sounds like a form of suicide, but for you and tens of thousands of thirsty city dwellers, it's the only normal and possible way to quench your daily thirst. But here's the thing. The banks of the river are densely lined with the most harmful and toxic medieval industries imaginable. Textile dyers generously pour the remnants of lead and copper sulfate into the water, turning the current into beautiful but deadly rainbow streaks on the surface.
Next to them, butchers work, dumping into the river the parts of animals that even hungry street pigs refuse to eat for lunch.
If a modern ecologist were to take a sample of this water, his lab equipment would simply explode from the sheer amount of heavy metals and pathogens. Yet you gaze at this multicolored foam with philosophical calm, sincerely believing that the swift current magically carries all problems far away. The greatest irony is that water carriers draw water for sale to wealthy townspeople right from this very same poisoned river. They scoop the water into huge barrels, load them onto carts, and haul them through the narrow streets, loudly touting the freshness of their dubious merchandise. You pay a fortune for bottled artesian water from alpine glaciers, but here people paid for water infused with the corpses of stray dogs. And the scariest part is that you'd have to drink it raw, barely even trying to boil it, because firewood in the city is too expensive for such trifles. It's a real game of Russian roulette, where instead of a bullet in the chamber, there's a lethal dose of E. coli or the cholera pathogen. The problem is also that the river is the main place for disposing of the bodies of those who died during local outbreaks of epidemics. When cemeteries become overcrowded, the quickest and cheapest solution is to entrust the corpses to the murky waters of nature's universal garbage chute. It sounds incredibly cynical, yes, but in the midst of mass death, people simply don't have the strength or time to dig deep graves.
Ultimately, this river is a perfect mirror of society. Mighty, filthy, full of hidden dangers, and utterly merciless toward the weak.
People try to subjugate it to their needs, but instead it methodically poisons them day after day, year after year. When the plague bacillus began its march, it found human bodies already considerably weakened by years of battling the poison water. You would have lost this biological war long before the black rats arrived, simply because you voluntarily drank from the poison cup every day. And if you had found yourself at this pier in reality, your modern immune system would have given up after the very first glass you drank. You descend a narrow, dark staircase into the basement of an ordinary city house, and the air here becomes so thick you could literally cut it with a knife. In the very corner of this gloomy room sits the local landlord's pride and joy, a huge, deep cesspool overflowing to the brim. You're used to all your problems miraculously disappearing into a white porcelain bowl, with the cheerful gurgling of water after pressing a single little button. Here, however, nothing disappears anywhere. Everything patiently accumulates right beneath your feet, biding its time to take its revenge. This is your personal foul-smelling time bomb, found in every home, slowly poisoning the very foundation of your existence. But things get more interesting if you try to understand the mechanics of this masterpiece of medieval engineering. These deep pits were often lined with stone or brick, but over time the mortar inevitably cracked, and the toxic liquid began to seep into the soil. It sounds like a minor household problem until you realize that right behind the neighboring wall, there might be a well containing your drinking water. This absurd proximity turns drinking into a game of Russian roulette, where your chances of contracting a serious infection rise in direct proportion to the number of neighbors around you. Modern building codes require such structures to be sealed off, but local builders operate by the rule: if you can't see it, it simply doesn't exist. The biggest problem will arise when this bottomless pit finally overflows and its contents start gleefully spilling right onto the floor of your basement. Hiring professional cleaners is very expensive. So many thrifty homeowners wait until the very last moment, risking the health of their entire family. When the cleaners finally arrive at night with their barrels, the smell in the house will be so bad that your eyes will water, just like those of seasoned soldiers on the street. You complain to the management company if your stairwell smells musty, but here you'd literally have to sleep on a volcano of your own excrement. It's a severe test for the nervous system, perceived as an absolutely unavoidable price for living in a big city. From the perspective of disease spread, every such pit under your house is an ideal incubator for millions of fleas. A dark, damp environment with a consistently above freezing temperature allows the parasites to overwinter comfortably and reproduce continuously even during the harshest frosts. Your contemporaries also often ignore doctors' recommendations to save money, so in that regard, you aren't all that different. The only difference is that local carelessness kills in a matter of days, while yours stretches out this dubious pleasure over many years. As a result, the cesspool becomes an invisible yet most influential member of your family, dictating its harsh conditions for survival. You hate these dark abysses, but you physically cannot imagine your city life without their constant and terrifying presence. They teach you to endure the unendurable and to ignore the threat that is literally destroying the foundation of your home. And if you spend even a single night in such a place, the smell from the basement would forever change your perception of the romance of the Middle Ages. It is a cruel and foul-smelling reality, where every new day begins with a reminder of how deeply you are mired in your own problems. You walk across the market square, clutching a small linen pouch tightly in your hand, stuffed full of dried mint, rosemary, and lavender leaves. Every time the wind carries another wave of odors from the open sewers, you frantically hold this life-saving pouch right up to your nose. You're used to wearing expensive French perfume to attract attention at parties, but here you have to rely on strong herbs just to keep from going mad. It's your primitive version of a modern respirator or gas mask, which works solely by psychologically tricking your exhausted sense of smell. It sounds like a naive child's game of self-defense, but under conditions of constant gas attacks, it's the only way to preserve what's left of your sanity. But here it gets more interesting, because the use of these herbal amulets is driven not only by the simple desire to mask the monstrous stench of decay all around. Advanced medieval medicine is absolutely convinced that terrible diseases, including the plague, are transmitted precisely through foul odors, miasms. Doctors sincerely believe that poisonous air physically penetrates the pores of your skin and disrupts the delicate balance of vital fluids in the body. Therefore, the logic is ironclad. If you inhale the pleasant scent of flowers, you automatically block access for the invisible deadly contagion. Your science kills germs with antibiotics, while local science tries to defeat death with aggressive aromatherapy and a bouquet of dried wormwood. Inside homes, the floors are often covered with fresh reeds or fragrant herbs, so that every step you take is accompanied by the light, refreshing scent of a summer meadow. The problem is that this plant carpet is rarely changed, and its lower layers quickly turn into rotting compost. Food scraps from your table, Bones and pet hair also end up there, creating the perfect breeding ground for fleas right at your feet. In an attempt to shield yourself from bad smells outside, you're creating the perfect ecosystem for parasites right in your living room. It's as if you were trying to dust your house with a dirty mop, genuinely wondering why things are only getting worse. City authorities are also keeping up with this crazy battle of scents and regularly order large bonfires of fragrant wood to be lit in the streets. The idea is to literally smoke the plague out of the narrow streets, just as you would normally smoke annoying bees out of a hive. The logic is astonishing. The pungent smell of feces is supposedly so strong that it can drive the plague miasma out of your body. You could actually sit by an open cesspool and breathe deeply, trying to save yourself from the disease with a therapy of choice. Shit. Just think about it. The level of desperation is such that inhaling sewer fumes seems like a more sensible choice than waiting for inevitable death. But here's what's truly ironic about this herbal obsession. Some plants actually did possess mild antibacterial properties. The very lavender and rosemary you carry in your pouch do indeed repel fleas, forcing them to seek another victim. Ultimately, your herbal mask has become the ultimate symbol of the illusion of complete control over a situation you don't control at all. You bury your nose in a bouquet of violets, turning a blind eye to the mountains of corpses and rivers of sewage, believing that a beautiful scent will save you from biology. If you were here right now, you would quickly realize that these herbs do not protect against death, but merely lightly perfume its arrival. This is your last naive attempt to negotiate with nature, using its own flowers against its most ruthless and invisible killers. You carefully open the heavy oak door to the most private part of the old castle, and a strong, painfully familiar smell of ammonia hits you in the face. This place is called the wardrobe, and you probably think you're about to see long rows of beautiful dresses and knight's cloaks hanging on polished hangers. But the truth is that a medieval wardrobe is a toilet hanging over a deep cesspit or directly over the fortress's defensive moat. Yes, people kept their most expensive and festive clothes right in the room where they relieved themselves. To you, this sounds like a disgusting joke by a crazy interior designer, but for the locals, it was a genius life hack for fabric care. But it gets more interesting if you understand the logic behind this strange coexistence of beautiful silks and disgusting human waste. In the Middle Ages, clothing was insanely expensive. A single high-quality woolen cloak could cost as much as several months of a craftsman's hard labor. This is a classic example of medieval ingenuity, using the smelliest place in the house to protect the most beautiful and valuable items. You buy expensive cedar hangers and lavender-scented sachets for your closets to protect your favorite wool sweaters. Here, though, people simply hung their best Sunday doublets in the very place where kings and barons would walk to relieve their noble stomachs. It's important to understand that this method of flea control played a cruel joke on everyone during the Great Black Death epidemic. Yes, ammonia killed some of the parasites, but it could not guarantee 100% sterility, especially in the thick folds of heavy winter wool. When plague fleas did manage to get into the clothing, they traveled along with their wealthy owners from one city to another. The lords sincerely believed that their wardrobes were reliably protected by cutting-edge methods, and fearlessly wore clothes infected with the deadly bacteria. Their illusion of control over the situation became an excellent Trojan horse for the plague, allowing it to easily penetrate the high stone walls of the castles. Ultimately, this strange symbiosis of a toilet and a wardrobe perfectly reflects the essence of the medieval approach to complex everyday problems. People here were incredibly practical and found unconventional solutions, making use of the limited resources that harsh reality provided. You would have had to endure monstrous inconveniences and odors for the sake of preserving your material possessions, considering it an absolutely normal price to pay for survival. Your era prioritizes comfort and sterility, while this era demanded pragmatism, even if it smelled of ammonia. And if you found yourself here, you'd have to quickly get used to the fact that the best protection is often hidden in the most unpleasant places. You sit on a wooden bench in a local tavern and, with a habitual, almost automatic motion, scratch your neck, trying to catch yet another brazen flea. In your world, finding an insect in your hair is cause for immediate hysteria. the purchase of special shampoos, and a complete sanitization of your apartment. Here, however, the constant itching from parasite bites is as much a natural part of life as the sound of ringing bells or the patter of rain. Fleas, lice, and bedbugs are full-fledged members of this society. They accompany you from the cradle to the grave, feeding on your blood every single day. You're used to living in sterile concrete boxes, but here you're a walking buffet for millions of invisible and perpetually hungry guests. But things get really interesting when you look at how people feel about this constant coexistence with insects. They have absolutely no sense of disgust about it, since parasites live on peasants, wealthy merchants, and even kings. You can see couples in love gently checking each other's heads for lice, and this is considered an extremely intimate and caring gesture. Modern couples watch TV shows together on the couch, while local couples spend their evenings together on an exciting hunt for tiny bloodsuckers. This is their strange form of socializing and expressing love, which helps them survive in this cruel and itchy world. Animals that sleep right in your home during winter to stay warm bring with them additional legions of fresh parasites. Pigs, dogs, and chickens generously share their fleas with you, creating a continuous cycle of disease transmission in a confined space. It's a true communal apartment where the boundaries between species blur, and your blood and the animal's blood become a shared resource for insects. A modern public health official would be at a loss for words to describe this horror, but for you, it would be the only way not to freeze to death in January. You pay for warmth with your blood, and here it seems like an absolutely fair and just deal. The most striking thing is that even when you start noticing strange dark spots from bites, the precursors to plague buboes, you won't connect the dots. There are always so many bites on your body that singling out a single deadly one is physically impossible for the untrained eye. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack when the hay itself consists of millions of other tiny, painfully prickly needles. Your habit of enduring pain and discomfort will play a cruel trick on you, depriving you of the main symptom of the impending biological catastrophe. If bites were a rarity for you, you would sound the alarm immediately. But here they are, simply the background noise of your life. Ultimately, this invisible army will prove far more powerful than any heavily armed Roman legions or Mongol hordes. The parasites will defeat you not by force, but through their persistent, daily, and imperceptible presence in every fold of your coarse clothing. You feed them, you warm them with your body, you carry them to new territories, naively believing that you control this world. And when the decisive moment comes, this army will simply deliver its fatal blow right from inside your own warm bed. If you were here in reality, your modern mosquito sprays would run out within the first hour, leaving you alone with this horde. You stand before the boarded-up doors of an old city public bathhouse, which just a few years ago was the most popular place in town. In your modern mind, a bathhouse or sauna is a symbol of cleanliness, health, relaxation, and a pleasant respite after a hard week of work. Here, however, these once bustling establishments have suddenly become a symbol of imminent death and the main cause of the spread of a monstrous epidemic. You see people avoiding them as if they were cursed places, while city authorities shut them down with their official, harsh decrees. It sounds completely absurd. During a deadly disease linked to filth, you voluntarily deprive yourself of the only way to properly wash your entire body. But things get more interesting if you try to understand the twisted medical logic that led to such a catastrophic decision. Authoritative professors from the University of Paris would tell you that hot water opens the pores on your skin. According to their theory, through these open and steamed open pores, poisonous miasmas from the air instantly penetrate straight into your blood. That is, the cleaner and more steamed open your body is, the easier it is for invisible death to penetrate inside and disrupt the balance of your vital fluids. Your medicine says, wash your hands to get rid of bacteria. Local medicine shouts at you, don't you dare wash, or poison will enter through your open skin. And the scariest thing is that this theory would fit your experience perfectly and seem incredibly logical. People did indeed often get sick after visiting public baths, but not because of open pores, but because of the huge crowd of people in one stuffy room. By refusing water, you are effectively signing a surrender to an army of parasites. voluntarily stripping away your last line of physical defense. Even the laundry that you use to wash frequently in hot water, you'll now wash less often out of a general sense of fear. Here they believe that a clean linen shirt draws beneficial juices from your body, so wearing dirty clothes is considered healthier. This absurd belief turns you into a walking biological time bomb, covered in layers of your own grime and other people's hungry fleas. Your modern mind would feel uncomfortable by the evening of the first day without a shower, but here people live in this state for years, considering it the norm. You turn yourself into the perfect breeding ground, proud of your prudence and strict adherence to medical advice. In the end, the boarded-up doors of the bathhouses will become for you a silent monument to a colossal scientific error and collective medieval madness. You cut yourself off from cleanliness precisely at the moment when you need it most for the sake of mere survival. Fear blinds you, forcing you to believe that a protective layer of dirt is better than the open pores of clean human skin. And if you tried to explain to the locals about germs and the importance of soap, they would simply burn you at the stake for dangerous heresy. This is a world where knowledge killed, and your ignorance was considered the best shield, until that shield was pierced by a tiny rat flea. You stand before a small copper wash basin in the corner of the room and carefully pour water over your hands before sitting down at the dinner table. You're probably surprised that people wash their hands here at all, since you've heard about the total hatred of hot baths and bodily cleanliness. But here lies one of the greatest paradoxes of that time. People really did try to be clean in places that were visible to society. Washing your hands before and after a meal was the strictest rule of etiquette for you, and breaking it was considered the height of bad manners and barbarism in decent society. The locals weren't pigs. They sincerely strove for cleanliness, but their methods and understanding of this process differed radically from your modern standards. But here's the thing. If you take a close look at the washing process itself, your illusions about cleanliness will instantly vanish into thin air. The water you use for washing is often taken from that very same poisoned river or dirty city well you already know about. You don't have antibacterial soap with a dispenser. At best, you use a bar of hard soap made from animal fat and wood ash that smells awful. You wash your hands with cold water, simply rinsing off the visible dirt, sincerely believing that this is quite enough for safe eating. You're used to washing clothes to make them fresh, but here they're cleaned simply so you don't look like a ragamuffin in the eyes of strict neighbors. This is aesthetic hygiene that serves your social goals, not medical ones, even though you sincerely believe you're doing everything absolutely right. Interestingly, you often use a rough cloth soaked in vinegar or wine to clean your teeth, scrubbing the enamel until it visibly squeaks. It sounds like a decent attempt to preserve your teeth, but your rough cloth scratches the enamel and the acid softens it, paving the way for deep cavities. You mean well, you're trying to take care of yourself, but a lack of basic chemistry knowledge turns your efforts into a form of self-sabotage. Modern dentistry saves your teeth with fluoride and soft brushes, while local dentistry mainly consists of the painful removal of what you yourself have ruined. As a result, your life is filled with complex purification rituals that give you powerful psychological reassurance, but zero biological effect. You are like an actor in a theater who diligently plays out a cleaning scene, unaware that the scenery around you has long since been burning hopelessly. You need this illusion of control over your environment simply to keep from going mad from the constant, primal fear of disease. When the plague comes, it will easily pierce through this cardboard shield, showing you that the real filth lurks where you never even thought to look. And if you tried to survive here with your knowledge, it would be this very constant hypocrisy of imaginary and false cleanliness that would drive you mad. You stand in the middle of a deserted street, watching a cart loaded with bodies and trying to piece together all the elements of this grand puzzle of death. The main reason why you, as a modern person, would not be able to survive here is not laziness or a lack of technology. Your main problem is the absolute, total, and impenetrable lack of knowledge among those around you regarding the existence of bacteria and the actual mechanisms of infectious disease transmission. All local life, all attempts at self-defense, are built on a foundation of erroneous theories, myths, and religious fatalism that ties your hands. Here they are waging a heavy and exhausting war against an invisible enemy, yet they are firing their cannons in a completely different direction, hoping for a miracle. But this is where it gets truly frightening, because the local logic is absolutely consistent and seems to everyone to be the pinnacle of scientific medical knowledge of the time. People see that where it smells bad, people die more often, and draw a logical but fatally flawed conclusion. The smell is the disease itself. You notice that people get sick after taking baths, and logically decide that water opens the door to disease, thereby depriving yourself of life-saving hygiene. It's like if you linked the rise in road accidents to the color of cars and started banning red cars en masse for the sake of safety. Your brain desperately seeks patterns in the chaos, but without a microscope, you find only false correlations that lead you further and further away from salvation. A lack of knowledge about the microcosm makes it impossible to properly understand the role of rats and fleas in the spread of this unprecedented biological catastrophe. To you, rats are just annoying pests that ruin grain in barns, and fleas are an inevitable background itch you've long since come to terms with. Not even in your wildest dream could you imagine that the fate of mighty empires lies in the stomach of a tiny insect drinking your blood. This is a brutal test of your species' resilience, where it is not the smartest who survive, but those who were simply lucky enough to be isolated or to have natural immunity. Your modern pride in the achievements of medicine is entirely justified, but remember that it stands on the shoulders of those who died here, unaware of the reasons. And if you remove your protective mask of knowledge, you will find yourself just as helpless a child in the dark as people were in the year 1348. You stand in the very center of this filthy, foul-smelling, and dying city, and now you see it with your own tired but still living eyes. You have come a long way from the squelching mud beneath your feet to flying chamber pots, from poisoned rivers to a mad fear of hot, soapy water. You learned that local hygiene was not the result of laziness, but a complex, paradoxical, and deeply flawed system of survival built on the fear of miasmas. People here tried their hardest. They cleaned their clothes with ammonia, breathed in wormwood, prayed, but they were playing a game whose rules they simply didn't know. And that is precisely why no modern person, with all their habits of comfort and sterility, could survive this endless nightmare here. So the next time you complain irritably about a brief hot water outage in your cozy, well-lit apartment, just remember this story. Remember the smell of the cesspool under the floor? Remember the river with the corpses and the itch from dozens of hungry fleas in your coarse woolen shirt. Realize how lucky you are to have been born at the right time, when the invisible enemy finally revealed its face under the lens of a powerful microscope. That time is gone, leaving behind only grim legends and deep layers of street grime hidden beneath your smooth paved roads. And you can sincerely rejoice that you view this world only through a screen, because reality would kill you faster than you could hold your breath.